the National Football League, one of the most televised sports in the entire world. Each game averaged 17.9 million viewers in the regular season this year, with an estimated 113 million tuning into last year's Super Bowl. But what remains every year is the clamoring from fans that there is a deep-rooted conspiracy at play, one of which, if true, would rattle the sports world to its core. Is the idea behind the NFL being rigged and the outcomes being fixed have any evidence to support this? Is the NFL determining the outcomes they want for financial gain? Today, on Unblurring the Unknown, it's only fitting that we cover perhaps the biggest sports conspiracy in only days before Super Bowl 58. Is the NFL rigged? Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown. As always, I am your host, Dominic, and I am back this week with a little bit of a different episode. Obviously, as you heard in the open, this week's episode is going to be over the NFL being rigged and the conspiracy behind it. Now, what motivated me to do this was obviously the Super Bowl rapidly approaching, so I decided I want to take a look into this as to figure out whether or not there's any truth or evidence to even support this claim. So initially, you would think, where do we even start with this? And I think everyone at some time has heard of this conspiracy, whether you've read it online or whether somebody has said something about games being fixed or rigged. There must be you must have heard it at some point or another. This is a pretty common thing. Now, you could say especially recently it is taken fold in the news on the NFL being rigged. And it seems like after each big game, there is always controversy of some sort. The media frenzy instantly starts with one side claiming was just another factor at play, but as always, that could just be a scapegoat for the fact that their team just flat out lost. So, with that being said, how this week's episode is going to work is that I'm going to go over some of the possible theories and explanations that people have in regards to the NFL being rigged. Now, I'm also going to go into some games that people have speculated that have been rigged or affected in some way, and how this idea of the league being rigged gained steam, especially in recent years, and how everything kind of comes together for my one true theory as to what I think is responsible for all of this. Obviously, you are all entitled to your own theories, but after doing all this digging and also doing personal research, I kind of came back to one theory that I think has the most credibility behind it, and I think everything else other than that is a little bit of a stretch. But I will tell you more about that in theories. Now, it is important to note that there is no direct evidence that supports the ideas of these games being rigged, so this is all speculation. But I will still do my best to provide as much information as I can to provide both sides of the argument. Now, even though there is no evidence, a lot of people have gone on the internet and have pointed out, oh, this is evidence of the NFL being rigged, oh, this is evidence of the NFL games being scripted. It's kind of a reach, to say the least. So there is no direct evidence. However, a lot of people point to the fact that there are a lot of coincidences that occur that cannot be explained. But I just wanted to throw that disclaimer out there, as there is no direct evidence to this, as I mentioned. Now, before I do that, however, before I get into both sides of the argument, I think it's important to separate the idea of, the quote-unquote NFL is rigged and the idea of the NFL being scripted. And I personally believe that the NFL might be rigged in some instance, but I'll get onto that later into theories. Now, those who believe the NFL is scripted think it's much like theater or professional wrestling, with the outcomes being predetermined and fixed to the start of the season. Many people believe this theory, and it made headlines back in 2023 when former NFL running back Arian Foster said on the Barstool Sports podcast Macrodosing that the NFL was scripted, and that the players get a script at the start of each season, and that practice every week is actually practicing the script, quote unquote. Whether or not he was joking about this remains unclear, as it seems like he was serious when he was speaking on the podcast, and that he was not joking. Of course, this lit a firestorm on social media early that year, in which many current NFL players and analysts commented against Arian Foster's comment. However, it didn't stop people from taking this and running with the conspiracy. Although this would be much harder to pull off, the whole idea of that everything's scripted, the outcomes are predetermined, that would require a cover-up of massive proportions, but that's neither here nor there. I'll get into that later. The most common conception behind the rigging conspiracy is that the NFL helps influence the results of their high-stake games to maximize profit and advertising revenue, which this would make more sense than a scripted idea. Now, at the end of the day, the NFL is an entertainment business, and businesses like money. Heck, we all do. If you had the option to make $20 million more from one team making it in over the other, would you? Now, people who stand behind this theory, rather than there being a script for the entire league, point to a couple instances where this could be the case, that the NFL did in fact have a dog in the race, so to speak, in terms of who they wanted in the Super Bowl or who they wanted in these AFC, NFC championships games. Now, you could throw it all the way back to 1991, the Super Bowl in 1991, where the New York Giants faced off against the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills were the heavy favorites to win that game, but they didn't, after a last-second missed field goal would allow the Giants to win as the underdogs. Now, everyone likes a good underdog story, right? And people obviously do, because this ended up being one of the most watched Super Bowls of all time when it was all said and done. Now, people who like the idea that the NFL influences games to get the teams that they want in there say that, okay, they like the idea of there being an underdog story, or they like the idea of, certain teams getting in over others because of polls they have in their markets, and so on and so forth. Again, obviously, this is all speculation. Like I said, there's no evidence to prove this. However, keep an open mind as I go through all of this. Now, the next game I'm going to mention that people think there might have been something going on in which the game might have been influenced in some way was in 2001, where the infamous Tuck Rule game would take place between the Oakland Raiders and New England Patriots. Now, if you know anything about the Tuck Rule and what happened during that game, you already know what I'm talking about. New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady was going into his throwing motion to throw the football when he pulled it down and got sacked, causing him to fumble the football, and Oakland would recover. However, after a review of the play, the officials concluded that Brady's arm was going forward as to make a pass, and therefore it would make it an incomplete pass and nullify the fumble recovery by Oakland. Now, the Patriots would go on down the field and tie the game and eventually win in overtime. Now, you might be asking, what would the motivation behind the NFL perhaps wanting the Patriots to win this game over the Raiders? And there might be a couple of speculative reasons why. On the surface, Tom Brady leading this team after starter Drew Bledsoe got hurt and then taking over as a starter was a very big deal and a big story. After all, a 7th-round pick leading his team to the Super Bowl was a considerable underdog story, to say the least, especially considering that they would end up going against the greatest show on turf, St. Louis Rams. That would sell tickets and therefore drive revenue. Others point to a possible connection with real-world events, such as the 9/11 terrorist attacks, causing a newfound patriotism in many Americans, and with that being said in the form of a historically bad team, becoming newfound kings of the AFC. With that being said, patriotism might be a little bit of a reach, but it's interesting to think about. Fast forward to the 2019 AFC Championship game between the New England Patriots and Kansas City Chiefs. A highly controversial roughing the passer call on Kansas City's Chris Jones on New England quarterback Tom Brady would keep New England's drive alive and eventually down the road lead to overtime, in which New England would win. Now, that call of the roughing the passer would be a toss-up at best, and it's important to note, I'm a Patriots fan. I've grown up a Patriots fan, and my entire life, all we've known is winning. So it's important to mention that I'm not partial in this, because I'm giving you all the facts. I don't have any horse in the race when it comes to who I cheer for when it comes to providing you facts. Now, that roughing the passer call would be a toss-up at best, and obviously that call would not be able to be reviewed or challenged in any way, and the Patriots would obviously go on to win. Obviously, Patriots, Tom Brady era, Bill Belichick, hot ticket item. Possibly getting them to the Super Bowl again would sell them more tickets than Kansas City making it, but again, all speculation. Now, that same year, in 2019, the NFC Championship game between the Los Angeles Rams and New Orleans Saints would take place, with one of the most egregious non-calls in NFL history taking place. Now, if you know what I am talking about, you would absolutely agree with me. This would go down as possibly one of the worst missed calls ever, and the NFL did come out with this later and said that the call was wrong. However, the verdict was what it was, and they weren't going to overturn it. Now, the call I'm talking about is a missed defensive pass interference call that was absolutely egregious. The Rams defender pretty much launched himself at the Saints receiver before the ball even got there. Should have been called. It was defensive pass interference. Should have been called. Was not called. The Rams would go on to win that game. You could not review that. You could not challenge it. So obviously, it was possibly one of the most egregious non-calls in NFL history. Easy slam dunk. Now, like I said, this would go down as possibly one of the worst missed calls ever, and the NFL did come out later and say that the call was wrong. However, the verdict was what it was, and like I said, the NFL was not going to overturn it. On the surface, the Saints got screwed, but if you look a little deeper, maybe there was another reason the NFL would want the Rams in the Super Bowl over the Saints. Now, the Rams relocated from St. Louis and returned to LA at the start of the 2016 season. Now, they could not get their desired location for a new stadium in St. Louis, so it made a lot of sense for the Rams to move back to Los Angeles. However, the Rams were not great in their return to LA, but put together some really good seasons going into the 2019 season, and were hot off the presses was the announcement of the construction of SoFi Stadium when the Rams moved back to LA. Now, this would be the best of the best in terms of stadiums at the time, and SoFi Stadium cost an estimated $5.5 billion to build. That, and on top of the fact that Los Angeles was a gigantic sports market and the Rams were finally in a position to win, could that mean that the NFL wanted A, the Rams to represent the gigantic sports market of LA? Or B, maybe perhaps promote the creation of a football mecca in a stadium that would represent both the Chargers and the Rams? Again, much of this would be speculation, but in a business that needs to make money and likes making it, influencing the outcome of a game would be advantageous to the NFL, especially considering Los Angeles' like I said, popularity within the sports market, and also them building a gigantic fancy new stadium. It would kind of make sense. And then you have this current NFL season that hasn't been free without controversy. One of the more controversial calls came during a regular season game between the Dallas Cowboys and Detroit Lions. At the very end of this game, a referee got confused on which offensive lineman reported as an eligible receiver, and called a penalty on the Lions as they went to take the lead in the game for an ineligible receiver downfield. Now, this call was a genuine flub, as the ref got confused on which lineman reported as a receiver, and it caused the Lions to obviously lose the game. Now, you could make the case that obviously the Lions were going for the 2-point conversion. They could have kicked the extra point just to tie it and brought the game into overtime. However, they went for the 2-point conversion. The ref screwed it up. But it is important to note that the Lions did convert that 2-point conversion, and the ref screwed up the call, threw the flag, said, okay, ineligible receiver downfield, called it on the wrong offensive lineman, and the Lions got screwed. So that is also important to know. Now, like I said, this call was a genuine flub, and the Lions lost the game because of it. Now, the decision of this game's final score was, of course, not overturned by the NFL. They said, we're not overturning the final score just because of a wrong call, or so on and so forth. However, knowing that the refs made the wrong call in that game, the NFL demoted referee Brad Allen, who he made the call in that game. So they demoted referee Brad Allen's crew out of the playoffs. Now, why would the referees make the mistake to begin with? Let me tell you. My thoughts about the NFL being rigged in that it isn't, but much rather influenced by financial motives like I mentioned before. And that is my big theory over all of this. Whether through sports betting through the refs or profit for the business. At the end of the day, money always talks. So I just mentioned the Lions game. Could it have been possible that either the NFL or referees determined the outcome of the game for financial reasons? Now, on the surface, the NFL might not have had an influence on this game, but rather the refs. Could the refs have gambled on the outcome of this game? Again, this is all speculation, and there isn't evidence to support this. Please keep that in mind as I continue going through this. I am just getting your brain moving and stirring the pot and having you think about all this in a critical manner. Now, before you say something about professional sports league refs having integrity and that this would never happen in a professional sports league and that a professional ref would never fix or bet on games, that is where you're wrong. We're going to throw it back to 2007. Tim Donaghy was a referee with the NBA for 13 years and was up to this point, and he reffed 772 regular season games and 26 playoff games. Now, a very substantial career, to say the least. However, in 2007, a scandal would break that would rock the NBA to its core. The FBI announced that they had launched an investigation into Donaghy for illegally betting on games he was reffing in and influencing and controlling the point spread. Now, if you don't know what that means, a point spread is a bet that can be placed on the result of the final score rather than betting on one team to win. You can bet a team to quote-unquote cover the spread, for example, to exceed expectations from where Las Vegas has set them at, or for them to not cover the spread. Now, it turns out during the FBI's investigation, they also discovered that Donaghy was approached by low-level mob associates to fix a gambling scheme in which the gangsters and Donaghy would make thousands of dollars by influencing the outcome of the games. Donaghy would go on to admit to gambling from the 2003-2004 season all through the 06-07 seasons. He admitted to placing tens of thousands of dollars in total bet money and was found guilty of illegal sports betting and served a total of 26 months in federal prison, split between two facilities. Now, during this time, sports betting wasn't really legal, even to the public at this point, and the NBA needed to protect the integrity of the league and came down pretty harshly following the scandal. Now, flash forward to modern times. Not only is sports betting legal in most states, but is also encouraged, as many sports that you watch on TV, you can't go the whole game without seeing some ad for a sports betting site in any way, shape, or form, whether it be FanDuel, DraftKings, Underdog, no matter what sports betting service it is, you can't go an entire game without probably seeing one. And that just kind of goes to show you how much sports betting has taken off in just the past 5-10 years, and just in general. It's become very mainstream, and that kind of adds to the modern day controversy of the NFL being rigged and, there being factors at play when it comes to sports in general. Now, the reason I wanted to share this story of Tim Donaghy and the NBA and the betting scandal in 2007 is that even though this happened in the early 2000s, it is still very reasonable to suspect that NFL refs, or even other sports refs, could be sports betting and flying under the radar. Again, as always, this is just a speculation, and on the side of the matter being that refs could have a personal agenda when it comes to making a couple extra bucks, that could be very true. But let's jump back to the present-day NFL. Currently, and for the past couple seasons, the big conspiracy online was that the Super Bowl logo conspiracy. Now, some of you might know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, the Super Bowl logo conspiracy was which the two colors that have been presented in the logo were somehow predicting the outcome of the two games, or the two teams that played in the big game that year. People only caught on after the 2021 Super Bowl between the Rams and Bengals, where the two teams' colors matched the logo, which was orange and blue. Then the following year, the logo's colors were red and green, and that was when the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles played, which honestly stirred the pot and confirmed the suspicions once again. So fans were very attentive to this year's logo when the colors being purple and red. What added fuel to this fire was when a Canadian TV station said that the two teams playing in this year's Super Bowl would be the Ravens and 49ers. And this was before each of their respective conference championship games. Now, obviously, that would match up with the logo conspiracy, as obviously the Ravens colors are purple and the 49ers colors are red. So obviously people were like, oh, this is a leak, it's a conspiracy. The Canadian TV station already leaked the outcome of the game, and this is what's going to happen. However, that obviously did not come to fruition, as the Kansas City Chiefs would beat the Ravens this year, which surprisingly only made people have more questions rather than answers, with some people online claiming that the quote-unquote script was leaked, and that's why the NFL had to change the outcome. People also point to a possible change or influence to this game in relation to the teams being leaked, if you want to call it that. Because the Ravens had the number one running offense in the entire league, and Kansas City's run defense was dead last in the league, and the Ravens decided to only rush the ball 16 times the entire game. Now, you could think on the surface of that was just poor execution, poor game plan, just across the board. Whether there is a deep-rooted conspiracy with that, who knows? Who knows if the Ravens were financially incentivized, with anyway, to create a game plan that would lose them the game. However, that is, like I said, a conspiracy, and that might be an entire stretch. But again, it's one of those things that you like to think about when it comes to the broader reach of the NFL being rigged. And again, the last little tidbit of information I have before I want to go into my personal theory again here is that one of these conspiracy theories that have gained traction on the internet ever since the Kansas City and Baltimore championship game this year. In case you have been living under a rock or don't have social media at all, the Kansas City Chiefs have been a very interesting case to watch this year, over the course of the year. Not only because they were the reigning Super Bowl winners, but also because of Travis Kelce, their star tight end, who was a fantastic player. He had gotten into a relationship with Taylor Swift. Now, again, like I said, if you've been living under a rock, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but most of the world knows that Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift have been an item since the beginning of the season, back in September. Now, I'm not going to explain who Taylor Swift is, because even if you are living under a rock, I'm pretty certain you know who Taylor Swift is. Now, before I go into the conspiracy that people have in regards to Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Super Bowl, I have to say, and it's important for me to say this, that during these episodes, and in the podcast in general, I do not share my political views, opinions, or anything in regards to religion. I want to give the facts, and only the facts. I do not have any biases towards religion. I don't have any biases towards politics. I present you just the facts in this podcast. My personal opinions are not reflected in this podcast. I give you just the straight up facts, and I want you all to know that. And that is only because the following statement I'm going to state is a little bit political. So I want you to know that I personally do not have any opinion on this. I do not have any preference. I'm giving you just the facts of what's online. So, that being said, the theory behind the NFL, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, and kind of what's been making its rounds on the internet is the NFL wanting the Chiefs to win that AFC Championship game because of Taylor Swift's financial influence. Since Taylor Swift has started attending Chiefs games in September of last year, she has generated $331.5 million in revenue for the NFL through advertising and other forms of media. Now that's a lot of extra dough. But in addition to that, Taylor Swift has publicly endorsed President Biden for a re-election campaign. And Travis Kelce has also been doing an array of advertisements for Pfizer, the pharmaceutical powerhouse that is Pfizer. So, what does this all mean? Some conspiracy theorists claim that the Chiefs winning, and with Taylor and Travis's supposed political views, that this is a massive push to get President Biden re-elected. Now, that might be a huge stretch, considering according to the Gallup poll, the president only has a 39.8% approval rating, and I checked that the other day. It's currently sitting at 39.8%. I don't know if it has gone down since the other day when I checked it, but that is current as to when I did my research. He only has a 39.8% approval rating as of very soon, and that is going through his third year in office. Now, that is not my political opinion. That is not an opinion. That is just a bona fide fact of that's what his approval rating is. But in regards to Taylor Swift being in the NFL, in my opinion, if I just had someone who gained my business $331.5 million over the course of the season just by showing up, I would know that it would be in my best interest to have that person be at the Super Bowl because of how much money they would bring the brand and how many new people that might not watch football to now all of a sudden watch football. It's all about that money. Seriously, at the end of the day, it's all about that money. So, if I can influence that, if I was running the NFL, if I can influence how much money my business is taking in by having a certain person or a certain team go to the Super Bowl over another, I definitely would, because it's all about money. It's all about making that money. The world revolves around money. Now, could the NFL influence the Ravens-Chiefs championship game in this favor? Who really knows? Because like I said, this is all speculation. But it's interesting to think about that, and that will be the end of kind of all this Taylor Swift stuff, because I know a lot of people hold very strong opinions about all that. Now, so could there be a cover-up when it comes to the re-election of the president and influence from Taylor and Travis and all that, as I kind of went into Taylor Swift kind of at the end of my last statement? And I'm going to trend towards no. And I think it's a hard sell to convince me on that one, of that this is a giant conspiracy, that Travis, with his political views and being endorsed by Pfizer and him doing all these Pfizer ads, and then Taylor Swift being like, oh, I support President Biden for re-election. It's a hard sell to convince me that the NFL has a horse in the race in terms of presidential elections. However, again, like I said, this is all speculation. They could have a horse in the race when it comes to presidential elections. I mean, it's all about making money. If somebody wants to make them more money than the other guy, it would make sense. But again, I think that's a massive stretch. And I think the Taylor-Travis kind of conspiracy about trying to get President Biden reelected, I think that's a huge stretch. But people are going to talk all sorts of things that look fishy on paper, and that's just a matter of fact. But with that all being said, let's get into kind of final thoughts, and let's kind of wrap all this information up, as I threw a lot of information at you, and really, like I said in the very beginning, there's not any evidence to support that the NFL was rigged or that the NFL is scripted in any way. However, I wanted to lay out a lot of instances over the period of, since the 2001 Tuck Rule game, and you could even single-handedly pick out a lot of these games where the calls went down and there were very fishy calls, or the refs got it wrong. You could pretty much pluck any one of those games out there, and you could say that there was probably something going on. And that could be the case. However, again, it's all speculation is what it boils down to. But what is my thought about all this? Now, I would think that it would be absolutely ridiculous to think that in today's day and age, with sports betting being legalized and it all being a money-hungry business, that games aren't influenced on a financial level, especially the ones with high importance or playoff or Super Bowl games. Even if the NFL doesn't openly admit it, I would have to imagine that the NFL would make more money if a certain team wins over the other, especially in the Super Bowl and in conference championship games. Could refs be betting on the games in addition to this? I think it's very possible. I certainly wouldn't rule it out at all. After all, NFL refs are only part-time positions, and they all have jobs outside of the league. Now, I'm not saying that the NFL refs are corrupt, but to say that a ref has never betted on a game or influenced the outcome of a game would be very close-minded, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, what makes this conspiracy compelling is that all of this is realistically possible. And even though there's a lack of evidence to support this, and really kind of any evidence that shows that this whole thing is influenced by sports betting or rigging game outcomes for more money, it won't stop people from being curious, or the refs from making bad calls against your favorite team. And unfortunately, we might never know whether or not there was influence by other people, or refs, or the NFL, or business people. We might never know if there was a game that was rigged. Because you would think that if it's gone this long, it might forever stay covered up. But that's kind of the appeal of the conspiracy to begin with, is that we truly don't know. However, on paper, it looks like it could be possible. But with that being said, I wanted to lay this all out here, and obviously I wanted to take a very different route this week. And like I said, I laid a lot of information out there very, very quickly. And I talk fast, so obviously I apologize about that as well. But I laid a lot of information out there. And I'm going to stand by my theory that it would be very, like I said, close-minded to think that the NFL would not have either influenced a game outcome because they preferred one team over the other. I'm not saying that they fixed the game for one team, but if they said, oh, we'd really like the Kansas City Chiefs to win over the Baltimore Ravens, but if the Chiefs don't win, oh well, we're still making money. So that is kind of what I'm leaning towards. I'm not leaning towards the idea that there's a script and this is this giant play, this giant circus, or whatever you want to call it. I just don't see that being possible. The moving pieces to execute that alone would be astronomical. It would take so much to cover that up and to keep it hidden from the public and hidden from just everybody that it would feel next to impossible for me. So that's why I want to go with the route that I feel like NFL refs or NFL officials or, higher-ups within the NFL, there could be some financial incentive for them to win certain games or have a preference on a certain team to win those certain games. But with that being said, obviously, I wanted to cover it this week with the Super Bowl rapidly approaching. Obviously, the two teams that are in the Super Bowl this year, nobody wanted them in there. However, that's what we get. We're still all gonna tune into it because we're all slaves of the corporate machine. We're all gonna turn into the Super Bowl because it's a Super Bowl. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed the little change in direction. Let me know your thoughts on this. Do you have some evidence out there that maybe supports the idea more than what I was able to find on the NFL being rigged? Please let me know. Shoot me an email. You can do that at unblurringtheunknown@gmail.com. You can shoot me an email. And while you're shooting me that email, you can send me topic suggestions. I'm more than willing to take topic suggestions. I'll take your topic suggestion. I will throw it in the queue. I'll look it all over, do some research, throw it in the queue with all the other episodes that I have planned to do at some point in time. And yeah, please let me know if you think that there's a deeper rooted conspiracy, or if you are convinced that the NFL was scripted. Let me know. Obviously, that's not my opinion, but please let me know. I love hearing opinions. I love hearing feedback, so please let me know about that as well. In addition to that, as always, at the very end of the episode, I do the obligatory self-plug thing where I say that if you are listening to this on Spotify, I am also on YouTube, so please feel free to subscribe to me on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, I am on Spotify, same name, Unblurring the Unknown. Go over there, turn on notifications so you get notified every time I post a new episode, and I greatly appreciate it. I love your guys' support. I appreciate it tenfold. And just so you all know, I do have custom cover art for all episodes now, and you will be able to find that on my Instagram, and that is Unblurring the Unknown on Instagram. But with that being said, that is going to conclude today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you have any other evidence that supports that the NFL is rigged, or you have any certain opinions on whether or not the NFL is rigged, please let me know, whether that be in the comment section or email like I mentioned. Just let me know. I greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, this is going to conclude this week's episode, and I will see you on the next one.